We'll open the hearing on House Bill 1575. Would the clerk read the title, please?
Relating to the primary residence credit to provide an effective date and to provide an expiration date.
Thank you, Representative Weisz. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Finance and Tax Committee. Again, for the record, Representative Robin Weisz, District 14. I'm here in front of you on House Bill 1575, which is a tax relief bill. And while it seems a little complicated as far as in the language, it's a very simple bill. In reality, there's two portions of it. It implements the primary and non-primary residence that's found in 1176. It also adds a primary and non-primary category for ag and commercial. And basically the definition is either in-state or domiciled in the state of North Dakota. And all the bill does, to get really down and simple, it changes on the residential primary, changes the 10% of the 50% from 9% down to 6%. So there's a 33% reduction for primary residence. On ag, it goes from 10% of the 50% of true and full value to 8%, which is a 20% reduction. And on commercial, it goes from 10% of 50% of true and full value to 9% for all primary categories. Non-primary stays the same at the current levels. The reason for this is, one, last session, we did pass property tax, $550 or 500, whatever it was exactly. Ag and commercial got nothing. Now we're going into this session. As far as I know, at least on the House side, this is the only bill that offers any relief for ag and commercial. Also, I think it's important that no matter what we do on property tax, everybody should have some skin in the game. And under this proposal, everybody gets, on the residential side, they're going to get a third reduction. Whether you have a $100,000 home or a $5 million home, you're going to get a 33% reduction. I think that's important. So one, the voters who will decide if there's a bond issue or anything else out there, they will still have skin in the game. I think it's very easy if you eventually eliminate property tax for the majority of the voters who actually vote, very easy to vote for any increase that a city, county, school wants. And Representative Porter was somewhat criticizing the increase in budgets. Well, if we eliminate property tax to the majority of the voters, guess what? They're going to vote for an increase. I'm not paying for it. Why not? You know, I mean, that to me is just the human reality. So, and one of the other reasons for this bill, I think, is fairness. Now, granted, I represent a very rural district. I think I have probably 20% of the rural counties in my district. So I got some information from my home county, which would be similar. So currently in my home county, under, for example, earlier proposals, only 11% of the property value in my county would receive any property tax relief. 11%. 89% would get nothing. Because in my county, 70% is ag, 10% is commercial. And then if you look at what the primary residence would be, you only have 11% of that total property value would receive any kind of property tax relief. So under this bill, it doesn't matter whether you're urban, rural, what your split is, everybody at least will get some relief. And frankly, when we look at energy and ag and business are the drivers of our economy, they didn't get anything last session, and we're not giving them anything this session under some of the proposals. I think this is important. The price tag would be approximately $540 million. That's based on the tax department's assessment of 25-27 being 3.15 billion, 18.8% being ag, 43.5% being residential, and 29.8% being commercial. So using those figures and trying to get some figures on the primary, non-primary, the relief would be roughly 350 million for residential, 95 million approximately for ag, and about 46 million for commercial. So again, residential will still receive by far the bulk of the relief. And that relief, I think, would be more equitable across the spectrum. And then everybody is a recipient of some of the relief. And the bill does not have any cap in it, because I think we've already, and as I testified in support of the earlier cap, certainly intended to play in with a cap. Also, it doesn't say where the revenue source is coming from, because I think, again, that's up to appropriations. I mean, we have the governor's proposal of 317 million general fund. However we want to do this is fine. The price tag, especially I think if you add a homestead tax credit, the price tag is about the same as what we're looking on other bills. So it fits within that area of total relief that we want to get. It's simple. If for any reasons, it's real easy to change that percent, say from 6 to 5.5, or 8 to 8.5, or 7.5. It's very simple to change the numbers. You know, if the committee so desires how they want to look at things. I certainly think our ag and business community, I don't know why they don't deserve some relief too. I mean, they've contributed, and, you know, and particularly I could argue business, you know, we passed income tax relief, but corporations didn't get any last session. So they got no property tax relief, no income tax relief. And now this session, at least under current proposals, they're not getting anything either. And frankly, I think to the industries that are making this state as successful as it is, it's a little bit of a slap in the face that we're not giving them anything. So again, I think it's simple. I know the language, you know, as usual, the language in the bill seems complicated, but it's very simple. We're merely dropping those factors: 9 to 6, 10 to 8, and 10 to 9. And again, it's approximately going to be about 540 million, excluding any homestead tax credit that I understand, you know, you've had a separate bill on. And so I'm certainly supportive of doing something like that too. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you, Representative Weisz. The bill does certainly have its really strong points, and I think one of them is there's no opportunity for any taxing district to come in on the backside, because it's the tax is going to be what it's going to be after the mill rate is applied, and nobody's getting a reduction. They're going to end up having to go on the record to raise taxes, and at least, but I suppose it doesn't do anything to address the increase in the value of properties. That,
well, Mr. Chairman, no, this bill doesn't. That's why I think it is a companion to 1534. I mean, so I'm supportive. This shouldn't stand alone. it does need to be combined with, and I believe 1534 would be the best cap bill, but whatever cap bill, it would need to reside within that.
Any other questions for Representative Weisz? Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Weisz. I can't make it add up to what you said the total per biennium would be. So in your bottom sentence, you have 345 for primary residence, 95 for ag, 46 for commercial. That adds up to 486 plus 75 million for the homestead tax credit. That comes up to 561.
Oh, that was a relief. That was, that should still be 447 plus, whoops, should be 45 left. I had plugged in 93 on the commercial in one of my formulas. So you take about 46 out of there, so then you'd be at roughly just a hair under 500 million.
So the 486 that I add up off your bottom line is
Be pretty close.
what it
yes.
is. Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry,
that didn't add up to what you were saying.
I had factored in on my spreadsheet, I can change formulas. I had factored at one point a higher number for commercial,
Okay.
which I'm sure they would enjoy if you wanted to do that.
Any other questions for Representative Weisz? Well, thank you for your testimony. Further support,
Thank
House
you,
Bill
Mr. Chairman.
1575.
Good morning, Chairman Hedlund, members of the Finance and Tax Committee. I'm Eric Spencer, President and CEO of the Greater North Dakota Chamber. We are North Dakota's largest statewide business advocacy organization. Our members range from sole proprietors to corporations. They include local chambers of commerce and trade associations. We're here in support of House Bill 1575. I should probably ask Speaker Weisz for my testimony back. He actually made a lot of the points that I was going to mention, but the bill before you is one of the few bills that offers broad property tax relief. We believe that property tax policy and all tax policy should be equitable, competitive, and consistent, and that would foster long-term revenue stability and provide certainty for businesses for sustained growth. Speaker Weisz was correct. Last session there was no corporate income tax relief. This session, there's no property tax relief for a significant property taxpayer in the state. Businesses in North Dakota contribute approximately 1/3 of the property tax burden in North Dakota, and so we think it's only fair that there's some relief for that community as well. I'll note that a significant issue for us is that everyone has some skin in the game, so to speak. We are concerned that in 10 or 15 years, when most homeowners in North Dakota may not pay any property tax, they're not going to have any concerns about property tax income or increases, bond questions, because those will all be paid for by businesses in North Dakota or ag producers, and we don't think that is good long-term policy for the state. We also believe that there should be some sort of cap that accompanies this bill. Our belief on spending caps is that they're important with this level of funding from the state, but there also needs to be the appropriate safety valves for growing communities or extraordinarily small communities. In regard to what cap bill that is, I think we're agnostic. We defer to the expertise on this committee to make that decision. But with that, I thank you for your time and answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Spencer? Looks like you're off the hook. Thank you for your testimony. Further support?
Chairman Hedlund, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1575. My name is Matt Perdue. I'm here on behalf of North Dakota Farmers Union. I think a lot of our interest in this bill has already been stated. We think that it's important that broad-based relief is part of the conversation around property tax relief this legislative session. I'll just provide a little bit of context around that. Earlier this session, we supported House Bill 1176, stood before this committee and said we thought that was a good piece of legislation. And one of the concerns we raised, one of the things we asked you all to consider was providing some equity for agricultural landowners and that people who pay property tax on that class of property. This bill certainly includes your primary residence, your ag land, your commercial, and we think it's a very important part of that discussion. Our members have really grappled with this question of how do we provide property tax relief that serves our rural communities well, but also serves the state well as a whole. And what they've said is targeted relief for primary residences is important. It needs to be complemented with some more broad-based relief. And so we think this bill accomplishes that. We know that you guys have some really tough decisions to make here in the weeks ahead. And I think from our perspective, we just think it's really important that broad-based relief remains an important part of that conversation. So with that, again, we support House Bill 1575, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Further support of House Bill 1575.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Pete Hannibut with North Dakota Farm Bureau. I am very pleased to join with our colleagues in the business community and other ag community leaders to say this is a really good bill for us, particularly in cooperation or put in harness with the previous bill. We think this is the path to glory for all of us and hope that you can support this bill. And you know, all of us, I think, that have supported this are supportive initially of the governor's plan, but there needs to be a complementary thing that levels the playing field and gives broad-based relief to everyone while keeping skin in the game for everyone. And we think that this bill and possibly parts of the previous bill are that path.
Questions? Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hannibut. So I understand that you're an ag group. And so I look at the percentages and I think who's representing the commercial property owners and their percentage of this. So a rural legislator and ag groups come in and say that it should be 20% for ag, but only 10% inside of the urban communities for their commercial property holders, which are the primary payers of property tax in their areas. So how fair, I mean, you said this is a real fair way to do it. How fair is it to them?
Fairness in certain rural communities may not be fairness in certain urban communities. And that's reality, I think, whenever we're talking about taxes. And in a taxing situation where we're dealing with formulas, understanding that if you know what you want on the right side of the formula, you can change what's on the left side of the formula to get that answer. We think that this addresses some of the problems that have been a serious thing in the rural community, rural counties that deal more, that fund more things on the backs of rural property taxpayers, landowner taxpayers versus the commercial side of it. I don't represent an organization that has a whole lot of commercial. I am sensitive to what you're saying and I don't deny it. But for our point of view, this in cooperation with the previous bill is a better solution. I know that doesn't answer your question, but I also don't represent manufacturers.
You can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hannibut. So because of how we assess rural ag land, I see quarters selling for $5,000 an acre, 20 miles out of Bismarck. They're taxed $900 a year, and their assessed value on that quarter is considerably less than what the property actually sells for.
Mhm.
So when I look at commercial property, they're assessed inside of political subdivisions, and they're within 90% of the value of the property. So, I mean, from a fairness standpoint, I guess I would have kind of a two-part question to that. Do you think that there's a single agricultural landowner that would sell their property to me today for what it's listed at on their tax form as the true and full value?
Answer to that is probably not.
Okay. Then my other question is, do you think that there's commercial property owners that would sell their property to me for what it's listed at on their tax statement?
Possibly not there either. I would say, should I continue? Those are short answers. I think I reflect on this one in that bare property, as your example, bare property of acreage in the middle of, outside of New Salem, bare property has an ability with commodity prices to generate some income, but doesn't demand a whole lot of the goods and services that property taxes pay for, versus in the city, the commercial property is probably more of a burden on those things that property taxes pay for, meaning ambulance, fire, better roads, that kind of thing. And so I think that's why there's a disparity, and I don't think that that's necessarily wrong. That rural, bare dirt ag land, while it has an ability in certain years, depending on commodity prices, to generate some income, so therefore it could be taxable. That doesn't mean that it demands the goods and services that a building in a municipal area that has employees and those kinds of things, they all use those goods and services at a higher rate than that bare farmland would. And the property tax payers in those situations, Mr. and Mrs. Farmer or rancher out in the countryside, they've paid for their kids to go to school. And if the average age of the farmer is somewhere above 60, they may have paid for their grandkids to go to school. So even the taxes, the part of property taxes that would pay for schools, have already been paid by that bare landowner already, and maybe twice. And so that's why I think more fairness is needed in the rural property category. That's just my defense of our position.
Mr. Chairman, so I guess I off of your explanation, and I'm not picking on you, you were the last one that came up that said that this was fair, and it's not. So I'm trying to point out the unfairness of what you're presenting. So in your defense then of the bare land by New Salem compared to the commercial property or the residential property in the city of Mandan, then why do they have to pay so much in county taxes when they aren't using the services of the county, if that's the defense of the farmer paying for not ever calling the fire department to their property? I've
Sure.
never had the rural fire department at my property either. I've never had the sheriff there.
Sure.
But I've paid for the grading of the road to the farmer out in New Salem.
Sure.
So where's, there's fairness, there's equity, and then there's this. So where do we get to the point where things are fair and equitable on a spectrum of things that generate income, things that don't generate income, things that are assessed at a different formula to things that are assessed by true and full value that's representative of what the market really is, or 90% of it? And, where does that equalization come from?
Mm-hmm. Appreciate the question, Representative Porter and Mr. Chairman. I don't know if we have a good answer for that, because we're only stuck with the system that we have and that we know, in that property taxes are inherently unfair for everyone, city people and rural people, because they never reflect the ability to actually pay those taxes. That's a fairness issue that we all have to address. my ability to turn a profit and therefore afford the taxes on bare land is no different than someone who owns a warehouse if their profitability is limited in the same way. So that doesn't mean that it's fair for us to pay taxes on our property at all across the board. There isn't fairness with a property tax system because it doesn't reflect the actual ability to pay. And so I think as for commercial people and farmers and ranchers are in the exact same boat on that. It's not fair for me to, pay for certain things that I don't take advantage of. It's not fair for a city person to pay for certain things that they don't take advantage of. That's part of being in a community though. So I think the unfairness goes across the board. And I think we all want a little more fairness, but we can't find that in a system that's based on property taxes. And that's a bigger picture discussion than today, but I appreciate the question.
So, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hanna, but then in the area of fairness, then that you would think that it would be fair to raise that commercial rate down to 8 and make that a similar 20% reduction because they're facing the same constraints that the egg producer faces and deserve the same percentage of property tax reduction because they're basically in the same boat.
Not necessarily in the same boat. So like I said, fairness to one person and fairness to another is two different things. And my fairness is not the same as someone else's fairness. So I don't want to go that far. I can see where you're going and I appreciate those comments, but I don't know that I don't need to speculate on that because it's not part of our policy.
Mr. Hannibal, with that logic that Representative has put out there, though, would it then not be fair to raise the residential piece from 6 back up to 7 if we're going to have equal reductions in the percentage?
All options are open, I suppose.
Representative Dressler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Pete, don't you think part of the disparity between the 20% reduction for ag and the 10% reduction for commercial could be explained somewhat by the ability to pass their costs upon, down to the consumer?
Certainly, other businesses have the ability, as farmers and ranchers are price takers and others are price setters. And that is a truism that also messes with the whole system. So there is that in that farmers have to take whatever the commodity world price is. And in certain settings, businesses can set their price and pass those things on to folks. We all know that. That's another thing that makes this whole thing unfair. And so that is a part of the challenge with all of this. So yes, I appreciate that statement and question, and I'm happy to stand for others.
Oh, the joys of debating property taxes. Any other questions? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you all for your time.
Further support of House Bill 1575.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Julie Ellingson with the North Dakota Stockmen's Association, and we too would offer support for House Bill 1575. As was discussed by several previous speakers, it's important to us as a very land-centric industry. Cattle producers are significant property taxpayers, that agriculture is considered in the conversation. You have a very difficult task, one I'm not envious of before you as you look at all these different pieces. I think just sitting here listening today, we've heard them referred to as menus and Legos and mosaics. We realize that there's many elements and are appreciative of the focal point that this topic has been. Certainly agriculture needs to be part of the conversation. It's important to us that we don't inadvertently create an inequitable shift, tip that three-legged stool, if you will, and the relief that's provided to some classes is shouldered and burdened by the others. We don't have the perfect answer, but we're looking forward to working with you on this. And again, just encourage you to keep agriculture as part of the conversation.
Questions? Thank you for your testimony. Further support of House Bill 1575. Is there anyone else who would like to testify in support of House Bill 1575? Seeing none, is there opposition to House Bill 1575? Is there any opposition to House Bill 1575? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House